Now, everyone knows that Tibet is not a part of China, but a colony of China, as India was a colony of the Britishers.
As China redrew its maps, half of the Tibetan homeland disappeared into neighboring Chinese provinces. What was left was renamed the Tibet Autonomous Region.
I want to shed some light on this subject so that awareness of the plight of Tibetans is deepened. A race who is suffering tremendously and without a voice. The Chinese name for Tibet is Xizang, which means treasure house. And because of its rare geological structure at the junction of the Asian and Indian tectonic plates, Tibet is indeed a treasure trove of minerals. Surrounded by the most impenetrable mountains and almost physically inaccessible, Tibet had once become virtually isolated. It was inhabited by an independent race of peace-loving Buddhists who used to practice their religion. Rather, it can be said that religion was the fabric of their life, and it still is the fabric of their life. Although the average height above sea level is 14,000 feet, still there is a varied type of topography in Tibet. In the northwest are vast areas of high, cold desert, and in the east there is an abundance of forests and fertile river valleys. In the southeast, the climate is nearly tropical, having the warmth of the lower altitudes where it borders with the Chinese province Yunnan, Burma, Bhutan, Nepal, and then of course India. In the capital of Tibet, Lhasa, which means the abode of gods, the most important place to visit is Potala Palace, which means celestial palace or paradise. The 33rd Yalung king, Songtsen Gampo, moved his court and capital there in Lhasa in 621 AD. He built the first palace, the Kukhar Pothrang, on the Mapori Red Hill, where today Potala Palace stands. In 1645, the 5th Dalai Lama renovated the ancient buildings, designed and started building the present complex. The 5th Dalai Lama began to work in 1645 of White Palace, and the 9-story structure was completed in 1648. In 1649, he moved from Drepung Monastery to this new residence. Then he started the work of the Red Palace. While the work was still going on, he died. The regent hid the news of his death for 10 to 12 years until the work was complete, making the excuse that the Dalai Lama was in meditation. Since its construction, the Potala Palace has been the home of each of the successive Dalai Lamas, although it has been only their winter residence following the construction of the Norbul Inca summer palace in the late 18th century. Potala is supposed to have 1,000 rooms, as well as many chapels. It has accommodated the Dalai Lama, his staff, and the monks and civil servants that ran the government. The White Palace, Pothrang Karpo, housed administrators and monks of Potala. The Red Building is Pothrang Marpo, containing the Dalai Lama's own household, officials, chapels and shrines used for private and state ceremonies. Inside the Potala Palace, there are chapels to all the manifestations of the Buddha, to the fierce protector deities of Tibet, the tantric deities, the early religious kings of Tibet, Songtsen Gampo, the great Indian sages Atisha and Shantarakshit, and to Tsongkhapa, the austere monk who in 1409 reformed existing Buddhism and founded the Gelugpa, the Yellow Hat Order, to which the Dalai Lama belongs. Also, there are tombs of some of the Dalai Lamas. At the top, as you're on the roof of the White Palace, turn right, and there are the private quarters of the 13th and 14th Dalai Lamas, the throne room, reception hall, meditation room, and bedroom of the Dalai Lama. At this time now, this entire portion was closed to the public with an excuse given of renovation. During the festival of Monlam in March of 1959, the Chinese wanted the Dalai Lama, the 14th, to come alone to their military compound on the pretext of watching a cultural program of a Chinese group in Lhasa. The news leaked out, and the Tibetans, apprehensive about this trap, rioted in protest against the Chinese. On the 17th of March 1959, the Dalai Lama took off his monastic clothes, put on a layman's chuba, and with a few faithful followers, family members, and 2 tutors, escaped by the back garden gate of Norbulinga, his summer palace. Some say that the Chinese did not know about his flight, while others claim that he was pursued by the Chinese patrols and spotter planes when he went on horseback over the high Himalayas to exile in India, reaching there after 2 weeks. On the 20th of March, the Chinese attacked Norbulinga, and after that they were searching for his dead body. When it was not found, they came to know that he had fled. Many people accompanied him along the way too, when they knew that their living Buddha was fleeing after consulting the oracles. The Potala Palace was shelled, then briefly, by the Chinese during this uprising. During the Cultural Revolution, at the insistence of Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier, Potala was spared. It has been closed since then and was reopened to the public in 1980, with renovations completed in 1995 using $4 million. The Potala Palace is a structure of massive proportions and an awe-inspiring place to explore. Before 1959, there must have been a lot of activity, but now it lies dormant like a huge museum. Photography of the interior of the Potala is forbidden, and all rooms are wired with motion sensors and video cameras. Jokhang Temple. This is one of the most sacred and ancient temples of Tibet. It is also known as Tasuglakang. The Nepalese wife of the king Songtsen Gampo had brought an image of the Mikyoba, Akshobhya Buddha, as part of her dowry. To house it, the king initiated the construction of Jokhang Temple between 639 to 647 AD. His Chinese wife, Princess Wencheng, also brought a Buddha image of Jowo Shakyamuni from China, and to house that, he built the Ramoche Temple. But after the death of the king, the Jowo Shakyamuni was moved from Ramoche and kept in Jokhang Temple in hiding for its protection. The word Jokhang or Jowokang means the chapel of the Jowo and is the most revered Buddha image in all of Tibet. It had originally been given to her father, Taizong, who was the second emperor of the Tang dynasty, to sit on the throne of China by the king of Bengal. There is one stone column out of 3 in front of Jokhang Temple called Tasunglakang Toke, an important witness in proving Tibet's claim of independence. Erected in 823 AD to commemorate the treaty that ended hostilities between China and Tibet in 821, it is one of the 3 identical pillars. The second was outside the Chinese emperor's palace in Xi'an, now destroyed, and the third was on the borders of Tibet and China at Gugumeru in the present-day Amdo. Bearing an inscription in Tibetan and Chinese, it records the agreement between the Tibetan king and the Chinese emperor Wen Wu Xiao Ten Wan Ti. It is obviously a treaty between equals, and not, as the Chinese would have it, between sovereign and vassal. In front of the Jokung's entrance is a forecourt generally crowded with prostrating pilgrims. Inside the entrance, there are 4 guardian kings. Then there is a main assembly hall or dukang, a paved courtyard that is open to the sky. During festivals, the ceremonies are held in the hall. The inner sanctum of the Jokung houses its most important images and chapels. In a clockwise direction are the chapels of Tsongkhapa and his disciples, Buddha of infinite light, 8 medicine Buddhas, Chenre Sig, Avlokiteshwar, having doors of the 7th century Nepali artisans, Jampa, Maitreya Buddha of the future, Chapel of Buddha of infinite light, or Opagme, Amitabh. On the upper floor there are also chapels, some of which are closed. The chapels are almost the same with similar images. On the roof you can see golden, gilded roofs decorated with lotus spires, Garuda-like mythical bird humans, Jia Shang Shang, wonderfully carved dragons with cheeky faces, with tails curved upwards. Many renovations have taken place in this temple over the centuries, but the basic layout is ancient and differs from that of many other Tibetan religious structures. One main difference is the east-west orientation. It is said to face Nepal to honor Princess Bhrikuti. The most drastic renovations took place during the reign of the 5th Dalai Lama in the 17th century. Only a few carved pillars and entrance arches remain from the original 7th century work of Newari's artisans from the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal. This modest-looking, 3-storied, red and white building has white curtains to shield the windows from the fierce sun. Jokung Temple offers a comforting and welcoming presence that transcends time, belief, or nationality. On the roof parapet of the main entrance is the golden symbol of Buddhism, the Ritak Chokur, the 8-pointed wheel of Dharma, faith. It is flanked by 2 docile fawns, symbolizing submission to the faith. Pilgrims of all ages and all parts of Tibet, as well as other countries, keep coming here and paying their obeisance, prostrating around the temple. Let's get back into distant time and trace the history of religion in Tibet. A few words to describe the Bon religion prevalent in Tibet before Buddhism. The Bon is called shamanistic faith, which included gods, spirits, exorcism, talismans and cult of dead kings, among other things, and almost certainly had a major influence on the direction Buddhism took in Tibet. Many popular Buddhist symbols and practices, such as prayer flags, sky burials, the rubbing of holy rocks, the tying of bits of cloth to trees, and the construction of spirit traps, all have their roots deep in Bon tradition. The Bon order, as it survives today, is to all intents and purposes a school of Buddhism. Bonpo pilgrims can be seen circumambulating monuments and mountains anti-clockwise and reciting their Bon mantra, Om Matri Muye Saledu. Mount Kailash and Bondri are Bon's holiest mountains. In Solan, Himachal Pradesh, the main center of Bon in exile is present in Dolangi. Well, that was something about the Bon religion. Now let's come to Buddhism. No doubt, Both Songtsen Gampo's wives brought Buddhism to Tibet, but Acharya Shant Rakshit was invited from India by Songtsen Gampo to preach Buddhism. During Trisong Detsen's time, Buddhism was firmly established in Tibet. He systemized the translation of its holy canons into Tibetan, and at his behest, the first great Tibetan monastery was founded in Samye in 775 to 779. Acharya Padmasambhava was invited to help to spread the fully developed Vajrayan Buddhism of the 8th century India. Acharya Padmasambhava was called Guru Rinpoche, and his statues are in all the temples. Credible historical records suggest the 32nd Tibetan king extended Tibetan influence into Inner Asia, defeating the Qiang tribes on China's borders. But during the accession of the 33rd king, Songtsen Gampo, 630 to 649, Tibet became an important religious power. The Tibetan alphabet is a condensed derivative of India's ancient Devanagari script, having just 30 of its letters. Sambhota, a Tibetan of the Thoni clan, with others, were sent to Kashmir by Songtsen Gampo in the early 7th century AD, and he, as well as others, adapted Sharda script prevalent then in Kashmir to fit the Tibetan language. The script, called Uchen, is easy to read and write. Thus, this nation has a vast literature, being literate quite early in its history. Kangyur and Tangyur are the famous texts of Buddhism. The kingdom of Guge in western Tibet invited the Bengali scholar Atisha, 982 to 1054, also called Jowe, from Vikramshila University to Tibet in the middle of the 11th century. Shri Guru Gorakhnath Ji showered their divine blessing on him. Disciples of Atisha, Jowoje, chiefly Drom Tonpa, were instrumental in establishing the Kadampar order, which later produced the Gelgupra order that the current Dalai Lama belongs to. The resurgence of Buddhist influence in the 11th century led to many Tibetans traveling to India to study. New ideas they brought back with them had a revitalizing effect on Tibetan thought. In 1374, a young man, Tsongkhapa, born in Amdo near Kokonor, set out from his home in central Tibet, where he undertook training with all the major schools of Tibetan Buddhism. By the time he was 25, he had gained a reputation as a teacher and also as a writer. He established a monastery at Ganden near Lhasa, and here he had a vision of Atisha, Jowoje, the 11th century Bengali scholar. He maintained a course of expounding his thinking, steering clear of political intrigue, and espousing doctrinal purity and monastic discipline. Disciples of Tsongkhapa, determined to propagate their master's teachings, established monasteries at Drepung in 1416 and Sera in 1419. In 1477, another monastery at Tashil Hampo in Shigatse was established by a nephew of Tsongkhapa, Gendin Drup. What were the relations with the Mongols? By the time of the third reincarnated head of the Gelugpa, Sonam Gyatso, 1543 to 1588, the Mongols began to take interest in Tibet's new and increasingly powerful order. Sonam Gyatso met Altai Khan near Kokonor in 1578, and he was given the title Dalai Lama, meaning Ocean of Wisdom. Consequently, all the reincarnations were titled with this name. The Mongols took a great interest in Tibetans' religious as well as political affairs, even helping them against the Chinese. With the Mongols' backing, all of Tibet was pacified by 1656, and the Dalai Lama's control ranged from Mount Kailash area in the west to Kham in the east. The fifth Dalai Lama was both the spiritual and temporal sovereign of a unified Tibet. He ushered in a great age in Tibet. He toured the monasteries of Tibet, and the construction of many monasteries began as well as the residence of the head of the Tibetan state, the Potala Palace. He invited Indian scholars to Tibet and, with Mongol financial support, saw to the renovation and expansion of many temples and monasteries. His regent decided to shroud his death in secrecy, announcing that he had entered meditation for a long period of 10 years.